Hi, I'm Kathy from the Delafield Quilt Company. If you're new here, welcome. I love quilting and I share the projects I'm working on and how I made them via this channel. If you're not new here, welcome back. And I thank you for sticking around because I took a little bit of time off making videos, but I'm back now. Today's project is a real easy, quick jelly roll project to make. All you need is one jelly roll and some coordinating fabrics. And this one was actually a complete joy for me to put together because the fabrics are so bright and colorful, and I just love the prints. So this was a really fun one to make. I hope you like the video. Alright, the fabric that I'm using for this jelly roll quilt are from the collection of Reverie by Melody Miller. It's a Ruby Star Society, which Ruby Star Society, if you're not familiar with it, is a division of the United Nations, which is MODA. I'm absolutely obsessed with this collection because the colors are gorgeous and the prints are really fun. So if you're looking for a fun collection to sew with that's really bright, this might be one you want to check out. And then to go with this, I have some Bella Solids. I have a ½ yard each of the 30s pink, mango, and dill. And then I have a 1¼ yard of the peacock. And I have a 1¼ yard of this because this is going to also be the border of the quilt. Alright, let me break open this jelly roll to show you how cool these prints are. Alright, these are just some really fun, colorful prints. They really did a great job of putting these together. So I'm going to have a lot of fun with this jelly roll quilt. Now to cut the other pieces for this, really simple. From each of the solids, we're going to cut 3 2½ inch strips that are width of the fabric, and then 1 4½ inch strip width of the fabric. And then for the border, we're just going to cut 3½ inch strips from the peacock color. Alright, let's get started with the cutting. This is going to go super fast because we're using jelly roll strips, which is really nice when you have most of your fabric is already pre-cut. Alright, so from each of the solids, I need 3 2½ inch width of the fabric. So the width of the fabric is basically just this whole length here. Here's the fold at the bottom, and then the opening at the top here. So I'm just going to cut strips. All right, so I'm just going to make sure that I have a nice clean edge to start with. And I'm actually going to just fold this over once just to make this go a little bit quicker. And so you can see what I'm doing. So I've had this folded, and I'm just going to do 2½ inch strips, and I'm going to do 3 of those. And then I need 1 4½ inch strip. Alright, so I have my 3 2½s, my 1 4½, and then I do have some left over. I'm going to save this along with the other ones for the binding. So I did go back and I starched and pressed on my strips. I probably should have done this before I cut it because I think it would have made it a little bit easier. Alright, so we're going to sew these together in 3 combinations. The first combination is going to be your 4½ inch solid with 3 jelly roll strips. The second combination is going to be 1 2½ inch solid with 4 jelly roll strips, and then the last combination is going to be 2 2½ inch solid strips with 3 jelly roll strips. With the 4½ inch wide strips, we're going to then pair that with 3 jelly roll strips. And I'm not going to really think too hard about this. I'm just going to pair maybe some that I think might look nice with the blue. You could certainly do this in whatever order you want. I think it's just basically whatever you think looks good. So for this first 4½ inch strip, I'm just going to sew these 3 to it, and you could really sew this in whatever position you want it. So if you want the 3 jelly roll strips together, that would be fine too, and I probably will mix it up a little bit as I go along. But really it's whatever you want. This is one of those nice quilts where it doesn't really matter because it's random, and it looks random when it's done. Right, so I'm going to also just press and starch these strips as well, and then I'm going to sew this first set together. Alright, then when I sew my strips together, I'm just going to put right sides together, layer one on top of another, and then I'm just going to sew a 1/4 inch seam along the entire length of those 2 strips. And I'm not bothering to pin my strips together just because I want this to go super quick. So as I'm sewing, I'm just readjusting. And then I pause and then I readjust the strips again so they're aligned. And then I just keep sewing that way. And then you're just going to continue by adding strips. I'll probably sew 2 together and then sew them to that set that I just sewed. And then you're just going to keep going until all of these strips from this set are sewn together. You can really press these seams whatever method you like to use the best, but I'm just going to do it to one side, and then when I sew this together I will rotate my pieces so that the seams nest nicely. Alright, so this next combination I'm going to take one of the solid strips from each of the colors and pair it with 4 jelly roll strips. So you're only going to do this once with each of the colors. And then just like before, I'm going to sew these together using a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Alright, so here's the combination with 1 solid strip and then 4 jelly roll strips. And just like before, I did press these seams all to one side. And now for the last combination, which is going to be 2 solid strips. And I am going to mix the colors up for these. And then pair them with 3 of the jelly roll strips. You could do 2 of the same, it's up to you, it's your quilt. So I'm just going to pair these 2 with 3 jelly roll strips and then sew these together just like I did before using that 1/4 inch seam allowance. Alright, so I've got that third combination sewn together with the 2 solids and then the 3 jelly roll strips. And now I'm just going to show you how we're going to cut this. So it's really important when you're sewing these together that you're using that scant 1/4 inch seam. And one way you can tell if your seam is accurate is the space for each of the jelly rolls should be exactly 2 inches. So then to cut these, we're going to cut this in 10.5 inch squares. I am using a 10.5 inch ruler, but if you don't have a 10.5 inch ruler, that's okay too. You would just use the markings on your board and your straight edge, and then line it up for 10.5 inches, and then cut. We should get a total of 4 10.5 inch squares from here. So I'm just starting with the clean edge, and then I'm going to do 10.5 inches. Okay, and we should get 4 blocks out of each of the sets. And you'll find that there's really not too much left over from these. You have a little bit of wiggle room in case you need to straighten it up as you go. But pretty much you use the entire length of the strips. So once I've got all the sections sewn together and cut, I'm going to have a total of 48 10.5 inch squares. Alright, so I have a lot more strips to sew together, but I wanted to show quick how I'm going to put this together. So for the overall quilt, we have 6 blocks per row and a total of 8 rows. And again, you're going to want to really mix this up just to get a lot of variety. So for each row, you want to make sure that every block in that row has the seams going the same direction, which I do here. And then for the next row, you're just going to make the seams go in the opposite direction so that when you sew them together, they nest nicely. And then when you sew the rows together, you're just going to line up your seams so you get that nice column look on your quilt. Again, that's going to be 6 blocks and 8 rows total. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to keep sewing my strips together in all the 3 different combinations, and then I'm going to show you how to put the rest of the quilt together. Alright, I've got my top all sewn together, and for the borders I just added the sides first and then I did the top pieces last. I hope that you like this video. If you haven't yet, please subscribe and visit our little quilt shop at DelafieldQuiltCo.com. Have a wonderful day.